find your opponent. Look at your neighbor and say, know your opponent. And so what happens with that, if you don't know who you're fighting against, how you going to fight? So the first step to victory is knowing who you're going to fight. The next principle is this. You have to know your weapons. Look at your neighbor and say, know your weapons. And then the last thing is this. You have to know who you're fighting with. So look at your neighbor and say, know your allies. Okay, the first thing is we look in verse 3. It says, for that we walk in the flesh, we do not war according to the flesh. Half the battle of us winning this war is actually recognizing what we're fighting against. I reiterate, Ephesians 6 and 12 says we do not fight against flesh and blood, but against spirits and principalities. So what happens is the enemy, he loves to work in the midst of confusion. Y'all catch that? I'm just going to teach you a few things. The enemy loves to work in confusion because what it is, if he can confuse you, then he knows that you don't know what's going on, and then he can do whatever he wants to do to you. In other words, it's like pulling the wool over your eyes. So if he can confuse you, what he can do is then just lead you and guide you anywhere because essentially you're blinded. And so a whole lot of times we can never win if we don't know what we're fighting against. And it's like this. You think about, I don't know how many of y'all study like U.S. war history or anything, but one of the problems when the United States went to war with Vietnam, they went to war with them on their turf. And because them cats knew the trees and they knew the jungles, they could pop out of anywhere. And so our tanks, our helicopters and stuff really didn't have any effect because they knew how to war. They knew exactly what to do. And so what the enemy is doing, because he's the prince of the world, he knows exactly where to pop up in your life. And he comes in very, very sneaky. He comes in through stuff like when you was coming up, people always gave you negative thoughts. They always gave you things like, you know what, you said, no, I want to be a doctor. You can't be a doctor, you stupid. Or then you always had stuff going on where some of us had sibling rivalries, and we had people that's always just kind of just been getting at us. And the whole time the enemy, he planted little seeds of negativity in your life as you was growing up. And he's been watering by every bad thing. Every time you fail, you're reminded of what somebody told you that was bad. You can't remember none of the good things you did, and the enemy just constantly just working on us. He's working on us. Because the enemy, he's so sneaky, and what it is, if we're not aware of who we're going against, he can do anything to us. So it's like this. We got people who end up in relationships, end up settling for anybody. I know especially amongst this age group, just keeping it real, we deal with like a whole lot of relationship stuff, boyfriend, girlfriend stuff, coming out of high school, going to college. And I don't know if y'all ever seen that person, they off the chain. And they with this person is just like, it's whack. I mean, I look at a young lady like, yo, she's beautiful, she got her mind together, you know, and why is she with this dude? He has nothing to offer her. But what I didn't know that she was battling so much on the inside, wondering if she was beautiful. Anybody who gave her attention, she quickly ran to it. Guys on the other side, well, man, I want to make sure cats know that I'm a man, so I got this good girl, man, but the jump off over here, so I got to make sure they know that I'm a man, so I got to do it. Not knowing that he struggled with so much self-confidence of knowing what a man really was. And because the enemy got into his heart, got into his mind, it caused him to do things that he had no business doing. And so here you are, and so here he is trying to figure out what's going on in his life when later on he's got married, he got divorced, got married again, and now his wife cheats on him. It's like, God, what's going on? That seed was planted a long time ago. And so we got to become aware of this, that there's things going on in our lives that when we get mad about stuff, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation, somebody can say something really, really small to you. It just irks you. Because it reminds you of something that somebody used to do in your past. And then what it is, it kind of just plucks that nerve that's in pain. And the enemy just like sit back there laughing. It says that, in a sense, it's basically like the enemy's attacks are described as fiery darts. And so what it is, they're sharp and they burn. And certain things that just get to us. Like you can be up all day, like you can be real good. One thing can happen and all of a sudden, you just went down. And you're wondering what's going on. You don't even know how to start fighting in the war because you don't know where the war is going on. And so what happens is the enemy, he tries to just confuse us and keep us from knowing everything that's around us. And so what happens is, in order for us to really understand what we're fighting against, it causes a thorough self-examination. It causes for us to really look within ourselves and begin to search the things that we've been through, begin to go through some things that we've experienced in our lives that will cause things in our life later on to begin to fall down, cause things in our life later on. Like, why would you have a fear of failure when God says you can do all things through him? Because the one time you failed, you felt like everything just crashed. And when you recognize that that's what your fear is, then that's when you begin to fight against it. But here you are, you never do anything big because you're always scared that you're going to fail. So it's like, you know, God, I could take honor classes in high school, but then one time I got a C, my mama fussed at me. And so I'm kind of scared to do it because if I get a C again, I'm going to get in trouble. And because you got that fear of failure, it's kind of like, I can't even do anything, I can't even be me. And so the enemy, he begins to attack us and keeps us, he tries to fight us right there. And so it's like, if you don't know what's going on, you're already fighting a losing battle. And so the first key for you winning your victory is knowing what you're fighting against. Somebody get on your nerves, it's not so much their fault. Wonder what's going on the inside of you. Why is it that they get on your nerves? What is it that they're reminding you of? What is it that bothers you about them? When you get in certain situations and you wonder why you panic, why do you panic? Trace that history. What happened in your life earlier, or either what's been fed to you earlier that will cause you just to freak out when ain't nothing that bad? And so you have to begin to identify exactly what it is that you're fighting against. The next thing is this. You have to know your weapons. In 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 6, it says, for the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God, for pulling down strongholds, casting down arguments and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity as obedience of Christ, and being ready to punish all disobedience when your obedience is fulfilled. Let's break down that verse real quick. It says, the first thing it says, pulling down strongholds. And then it says, casting down arguments. And then it says, bringing every thought into captivity. When you begin to examine that, you begin to understand when the enemy is trying to attack you, you begin to understand what your weapon is for. And so this is why God will tell you, don't be conformed, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, because the battle starts there. And so we have to begin just to understand exactly what our weapons are. And it says like this, at the end it says, and punish disobedience. It says punish disobedience. And when Paul says this, he comes across with some major authority. In other words, he's saying, in order for us to actually win the things that's going on, the temptations that we're faced with, the battles that we face with, we have to punish disobedience in our lives. In other words, we have to die to our flesh. We have to stop falling to temptation by giving God obedience. It says obedience is better than sacrifice. And so our key to victory is punishing disobedience with obedience.